And a good day to you all. Our first Weather Academy of the new year 2021. Hopefully you had a great holiday season and we're back on track here with another round of the Weather Academy. Now, one of the things, like I usually do whenever I do the Weather Academy segments, I like to focus on the current weather conditions and maybe do a little bit of explanation as to what's going on when it comes to the weather. And if one thing I want to show you, a lot of times we talked about the different cloud types, and while you can look at pictures to see just what the clouds look like, let's pop up full screen here, Cindy, and we'll show you. If ever you want to know what stratus looks like, there it is. Not the most exciting of clouds. Stratus tends to be, you can see there, it looks like it's fairly uniform. What do we mean by that? That means it kind of blankets the sky with not much changes in texture, not much changes in color. You can see it's kind of a uniform gray. Now here, a little darker gray now and then. But overall, this is your classic look at stratus clouds. And they typically form when the winds are light. If you notice closely here, you can see this is an airport shot, and you see some steam coming off here. Very light winds. That's often associated with stratus clouds. Stratus clouds are what we call stable clouds. You can come back here, Cindy. They tend to be stable. What we mean is that when you have a stable atmosphere, typically you have mild air with cooler air at the surface. So since warmer air tends to rise and cooler air tends to stay toward the surface, if you have that kind of weather pattern, there's not much mixing going on in the atmosphere. And that's what gives the clouds their texture. It's that up and down motions and the mixing of the atmosphere, which typically occurs when you warm up the surface and really cool down the upper levels. But in this particular case, the temperature aloft is actually a little bit warmer than here at the surface. So the atmosphere doesn't want to mix. It's like, hey, this is what I like. Okay, this is a stable atmosphere, and that's why the clouds look fairly uniform, and that's how you get the stratus clouds. And a lot of times the same reason that we don't have the texture in the clouds is also the same reason we have light winds. If there's no mixing of the atmosphere, there's no churning, air doesn't come down and move, so we have a very little change in the atmosphere and therefore very little wind. So usually stratus clouds or stratus type clouds are normally associated with some stable conditions. You're not going to get any big storms of stratus clouds, though you will get light precipitation if the moisture is thick enough, and it was thick enough for the past couple of days to give us a little bit of a freezing precipitation, freezing drizzle, which causes a little bit of slick spots in some of those roadways away from the lake shore, and that's what you typically get with stratus clouds. Now on a satellite picture, let's go full screen again. On a satellite picture, this is a typical look with stratus clouds. You get even with this front here, let's just ignore the front for now. Notice the kind of uniform grayness of the look here. This is Wisconsin, Chicago, Indiana, here in Erie. That kind of uniform gray look, that's typical of a stratus look to this particular satellite shot. Now, in the meantime, we do have a cold front here. Let's pay a little more attention to it. And first of all, you notice we have a little more texture here, a little more level. See some brighter whites here indicating that there are clouds of different levels with the front, and even some precipitation. That's what this white is. And the blue is actually a little hit of maybe a somewhat steadier snowfall, but for the most part, it's widely scattered, kind of scant. One thing that you may notice, and of course, you know the cold front there. That cold front is when cold air undercuts warm air, and that's what gives us, our cold front. Let's come back to the camera here. And so typically in the cold front, you have cold air pushing the warm air, pushing it up, and that's what gives us the clouds. But we have two types of front. If you notice with this particular front, most of the precipitation is, and the clouds are behind the front. And this is what we call a catafront, K-A-T-A. Catafront. Typically, cold fronts, most of the precipitation, the clouds, are ahead of the front, but with the catafront, they're normally behind it. This typically happens when you have slow-moving fronts, where oftentimes the front goes faster than the forcing that causes the clouds. So it's kind of hard to give any kind of comparison here to real life. But basically, the forcing is going faster with the front, or the front, excuse me, is going faster than the forcing is able to keep up. So things aren't in sync. That's why catafronts typically are not fronts you would expect a lot of storminess because they're not lined up well. When you have a good, strong cold front with a lot of support in the atmosphere above it, then you get some good snow or good storms. But here, the best forcing is behind the front while the cold front moves ahead of it. Things are out of sync. Are you ever out of sync where you wake up in the morning and you're like, ugh, I mean, you're alive and you're moving, but you're just not feeling right. Your body's out of sync and you don't perform as well. Well, same thing in the atmosphere. All the ingredients aren't lining up. Things aren't lining up quite so well. So it's just not an ideal situation where you get a lot of precipitation. That's what we get here with a catafront. And that's also because it's a slow-moving front. Good rule of thumb here, slow-moving systems, slow changes in the weather. How long have we been staying in this gray overcast? We've been staying with it for the past couple of days. And the way things are looking, things are not going to change a whole lot. Let's go full screen here. Let's see what's happening. This is the jet stream pattern. And this one is typical of a catafront. We have a large trough here, right here. This is a large trough. Again, large systems are also slow-moving systems. So this trough here is, because it's so large, so slow-moving, it's not going to move the front along. So we have don't have a whole lot of movement here, and that's why things are kind of stop. Now, the good news is, as I'm going to put this into motion, the map's probably going to jump here. Oh, I guess it won't. Oh, that's good. So that low trough gradually moves out by tomorrow, and we get a little bit of ridging coming in. And then as we head toward Thursday, here's this low pressure. It's well to the west, so this is the next trough. But notice the jet stream, wide ranges here between the arrows. So a lot of light movement of the winds. You can come back to me, Cindy. Light movement of the winds means that there's just not going to be much changes in the forecast with time. But eventually the drier air will punch in, and we should be able to get a little more sunshine by the end of the week. But with this low pressure trough pretty deep, don't expect any big warm-ups. Troughs tend to mean some cooler weather. And that's what we will experience, even if the sun does come out later on in the day. So there's a weather roundup. That's how things are looking. Thanks for joining us on this edition of the Weather Academy. Enjoy, and we'll do this again next week. Take care.